He was a powerful CEO, used to having everything under control. She was a delivery woman struggling to survive amid daily challenges. An unexpected encounter put them face to face in a battle of wits. What started as a confrontation turned into a journey that would change their lives forever. Before discovering this surprising story, don't forget to follow our best narratives. Jessica Mendez adjusted the thermal backpack on her shoulders while checking the address on the app one more time. The imposing commercial building on Fifth Avenue would intimidate anyone, but after 2 years making deliveries across New York City, she was used to sophisticated environments. Her worn sneakers contrasted with the marble floor of the lobby, and her simple app uniform stood out among the executives in their impeccable suits. 42nd floor, Anderson and Associates law firm, she murmured to herself, heading toward the elevators. The day was particularly busy, and a small crowd was gathering waiting for the next elevator. When the doors finally opened, Jessica found herself squeezed between businessmen and women, all absorbed in their smartphones. The elevator was almost full when a tall man, approximately 35 years old, hurriedly entered, his blue eyes fixed on documents he was impatiently flipping through. A sound alert echoed through the cabin. Weight limit exceeded. The delivery. "Girl needs to wait for the next one," said a woman in a grey suit, giving Jessica a disdainful look. "Excuse me, but I got here before several people," Jessica responded, keeping her voice firm. "Besides, I have a schedule to keep, just like all of you." The blue-eyed man looked up from his documents, analyzing the situation. "You should be more patient and wait your turn," he said, with a tone of superiority that made Jessica's blood boil. "And you should know the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, which guarantees the principle of equality. Or are you going to, tell me your time is more valuable than mine, just because you're wearing a suit that probably cost 3 months of my salary?" An uncomfortable silence took over the elevator. The blue-eyed man raised his eyebrows, surprised by the response. Before he could reply, 2 people volunteered to wait for the next elevator, resolving the impasse. During the ride up, Jessica could feel the man's curious gaze on her. When she reached her destination, she discovered that he was also getting off on the same floor. To her surprise, he followed her to the reception desk. "Delivery for Mr. Ethan Anderson," Jessica announced to the receptionist. "That's me," said the blue-eyed man, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "And I must admit, I was impressed by your legal knowledge in the elevator." Jessica felt her face warm up, but maintained her professional posture as she handed over the order. Ethan, however, didn't seem willing to end the conversation. "Do you have a background in law?" "I was in my 3rd year at Columbia Law, but I had to take a leave of absence due to financial issues," she replied, trying not to show how much that memory still hurt. Ethan observed her for a few moments as if evaluating something. "Come with me," he said, heading to an empty meeting room. "I want to give you a test if you don't mind." Jessica hesitated. She had other deliveries to make, but something in his expression aroused her curiosity. She followed him to the room, where he began to lay out a complex case about corporate law. "What would you do in this situation?" he asked, after presenting all the details. Without hesitation, Jessica began to analyze the case, citing precedents and pointing out possible solutions. Her legal mind, dormant during her years working as a delivery person, awakened with full force. For 15 minutes, she discussed the topic with an eloquence that surprised even herself. Ethan listened attentively, occasionally taking notes. When she finished, he smiled in a different way, no longer with arrogance but with genuine interest. "Impressive," he said. "You just solved a real case that's been on our desk for weeks, and your solution is brilliant in its simplicity." Jessica felt her heart race. "Thank you, but I need to go. I have other deliveries." "Wait," Ethan interrupted her, handing her a card. "I want to make a proposal. How about trading deliveries for an internship at our firm, starting tomorrow?" The world seemed to spin for a moment. Jessica looked at the card in her hands, which read, "Ethan Anderson, CEO and founding partner." "But I haven't even graduated yet," she argued. "That can be resolved. We offer scholarships for promising employees, and you, Jessica, are much more than promising." At that moment, Jessica felt that her life was about to change drastically. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor. The same man who had belittled her in the elevator was now offering her a chance to resume her dreams. "I need to think," she said, trying to process everything that was happening. "Of course," Ethan replied, taking a pen and writing his personal number on the back of the card. "Let me know your decision by the end of the day." When Jessica left the office, her hands were trembling slightly. The thermal backpack on her shoulders now seemed lighter, as if the weight of years of struggle was beginning to dissipate. While waiting for the elevator to go down, she couldn't get Ethan's blue eyes out of her mind, nor the way he had looked at her when making the proposal. What she didn't know was that that elevator encounter would mark just the beginning of a story that would change not only her life, but also that of the powerful CEO who had underestimated her. Fate had intertwined their paths in an unexpected way, and the consequences of that meeting would be much deeper than either could imagine. Jessica spent the rest of that day with her mind in turmoil, divided between the excitement of the opportunity and the fear of the unknown. While making her deliveries automatically, she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan Anderson's proposal. His card weighed in her pocket as if it were made of lead, not paper. At the end of her shift, she sat on a bench in Central Park, her favorite place to think. The sun was setting over the New York skyscrapers, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She took the card from her pocket for the 10th time that day, running her fingers over the embossed letters. Her younger sister, Becky, who was in high school, depended on her to help with household expenses since their mother had fallen ill. Her job as a delivery person, though tiring, guaranteed a predictable income. An internship, on the other hand, was a leap into the unknown, but the possibility of returning to law school. "You can't waste this chance," she said to herself, picking up her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number written on the back of the card. Ethan answered on the second ring. "Jessica," he said, as if already expecting her call. "What's your decision?" "I accept," she replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. "But I need to know the practical details. I have family responsibilities and—" "We'll discuss everything tomorrow," he interrupted. "Arrive at 8 a.m. I'll ask Helena, our HR manager, to prepare your contract. The scholarship value is already included." That night, Jessica could hardly sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, imagining what it would be like to work in one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of gowns and courtrooms with Ethan, Anderson always present, his blue eyes watching her with a mixture of challenge and admiration. The next morning she wore her best clothes, a black pencil skirt she had kept from her college days, and a white shirt bought on sale. Her brown hair, normally tied in a careless ponytail, was arranged in an elegant bun. Upon arriving at the FAI office, she was greeted by Helena Roberts, a middle-aged woman with a welcoming smile. "Dr. Anderson told me about you," she said, leading Jessica to her office. "I must admit I was intrigued by your story." During the next hour, Jessica signed a stack of documents while Helena explained the benefits and responsibilities of her new position. The intern's salary was less than her earnings as a delivery person, but the scholarship more than made up for the difference. "And this will be your space," said Helena, leading her to a desk in an area shared with other interns. "For now, you'll assist different teams to learn about all areas of the firm." Jessica was organizing her few belongings when she felt a presence behind her. It was Ethan, imposing in his navy blue suit. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Honestly? A little overwhelmed," she replied, using the term without realizing it. Ethan smiled. "Interesting choice of words. I see that besides law, you also master English." "I learned on my own, watching legal dramas," she admitted, blushing slightly. "Even more impressive," he said, and Jessica noticed that his eyes had a different gleam when he smiled. "Come with me. I want you to participate in an important meeting." Jessica followed him to a conference room where several senior lawyers were gathered. Ethan introduced her as a new collaborator and asked her to sit down. During the next hour, they discussed a complex case involving corporate law. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Jessica identified a legal loophole that no one had noticed. When she finished explaining her reasoning, a stunned silence took over the room. "This is why she's here," said Ethan, with evident satisfaction. "Sometimes we need a fresh look, free from biases and preconceptions." Not everyone seemed to share his enthusiasm. Jessica noticed the suspicious looks from some lawyers, especially from Richard Miller, one of the firm's oldest partners. "Very interesting," said Richard, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But perhaps we should stick to more experienced opinions." "Experience is valuable, Richard," Ethan replied, "but raw talent also deserves recognition. And Jessica has both." At the end of the day, while arranging her desk to leave, Jessica received a message on her cell phone. It was from Ethan. "Excellent. First day. Keep it up." Something in the tone of the message, or perhaps in the way he had defended her in the meeting, made her heart beat faster. She tried to push that feeling away, reminding herself that he was her boss, the CEO of the firm, and that any other type of thought would be inappropriate. In the crowded subway on her way home, Jessica reflected on how her life had completely changed in just 24 hours. From delivery girl to intern at one of the largest law firms in the country, about to resume her studies. It was almost surreal. What she didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The coming weeks would bring much greater challenges, both professional and personal. And Ethan Anderson, the man who had changed her destiny, would become an increasingly constant presence in her thoughts, even if she fought against it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and challenges for Jessica. During the day, she dove headfirst into the firm's work, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. At night, she resumed her classes at law school, determined to make up for lost time. The routine was exhausting, but each small achievement made her feel she was on the right track. At the firm, her legal analytical ability quickly caught attention. Jessica had a natural gift for finding creative solutions to complex problems, and her determination to learn impressed even the most skeptical lawyers. On a particularly busy afternoon, Ethan called her to his office. "I need your opinion on something," he said, handing her a folder. "It's a delicate case that just came in." Jessica examined the documents carefully. It was a corporate dispute involving one of the country's largest technology companies. The more she read, the more her brow furrowed. "Something's wrong here," she murmured, more to herself than to Ethan. "Go on," he encouraged, observing her with interest. "The dates don't match up," explained Jessica, spreading the documents on the desk. "And there are inconsistencies in the accounting records that suggest—" Wait a moment. She took her laptop and began searching frantically. Ethan watched her in silence, fascinated by her absolute concentration. "Here!" she exclaimed after a few minutes. "The company formed a subsidiary 6 months before the dispute began. If we cross-reference the information with these contracts, it's clear there was a disguised attempt to dilute the minority shareholders' stock." Ethan smiled, a gleam of admiration in his blue eyes. "Do you know how long our team has been analyzing this case without noticing that?" "How long?" 2 weeks, he replied, leaning over to examine the notes she had made. The movement brought him closer to her, and Jessica caught his woody cologne. For a moment, their eyes met, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. The moment was interrupted by knocks on the door. It was Richard Miller, who entered without waiting for a response. "Ethan, we need to discuss the techno case." "Oh, I didn't know you were busy," he said, casting a sideways glance at Jessica. "Actually, Jessica just made a crucial discovery about that case," Ethan replied, explaining her analysis. Richard listened with an increasingly closed expression. "Interesting," he said, in a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. "But I think it's risky to base our strategy on the opinion of an intern." "An intern who identified in 30 minutes something your team didn't see in 2 weeks, Ethan retorted, his voice maintaining a professional tone but with a hint of irritation. Jessica felt the tense atmosphere between the two men. "Excuse me," she said, standing up. "I'll organize a detailed report on my findings." As she left the room, she could still hear Richard. "Ethan, you're letting your fascination with this girl cloud your professional judgment." The comment hit her like a punch to the stomach. Fascination? Was Ethan fascinated by her? And why did this possibility make her heart race? In the days that followed, Jessica dedicated herself even more to work, determined to prove her worth. On her own merit, her analysis of the Techno Solutions case proved correct, and the strategy developed from her discovery secured a significant victory for the firm. Success, however, came at a price. Jessica began to notice hostile looks from some colleagues, especially from Richard's team. Malicious comments were whispered when she passed, insinuating that her rapid progress had more to do with the CEO's special attention than with her competence. One afternoon, while working late on a new case, Jessica was surprised by Marilyn, one of the junior lawyers closest to Richard. "Must be nice to have the boss wrapped around your finger," Marilyn provoked, her sweet tone barely disguising the venom in her words. Jessica looked up from her documents, maintaining her calm. "I prefer to let my work speak for me," she replied. "You should try it too, Marilyn. It's more rewarding than spreading gossip through the hallways." The response left Marilyn red with anger, but before she could retaliate, Ethan appeared in the office. "Jessica, glad you're still here," he said, completely ignoring Marilyn's presence. "I need your help with an important client." As she followed him to his office, Jessica struggled with conflicting feelings. On one hand, she felt proud to have earned Ethan's trust. On the other, her colleagues' insinuations bothered her more than she'd like to admit. What she didn't know was that Ethan was also fighting his own internal battle. With each passing day, it became more difficult for him to maintain professional distance. Her intelligence, her determination, the way her eyes lit up when she solved a particularly challenging problem, all of this attracted him in a way he had never experienced before. That night, as they worked together on the new case, the tension between them was almost palpable. Every time their eyes met, every time their fingers brushed while exchanging documents, they both felt an electric current run through their bodies. But they both knew they needed to keep the relationship strictly professional. There was a lot at stake: her reputation, his position, the respect of the firm. However, the more they tried to ignore the growing attraction between them, the stronger it became. What neither of them realized was that their efforts to maintain professionalism only made what was happening more obvious to everyone around them. And soon, this tension would reach a boiling point that would change everything. 3 months had passed since Jessica started at Anderson & Associates, and her life had completely transformed. From food delivery girl to one of the most promising young lawyers in New York, she now lived a reality that previously existed only in her boldest dreams. Her tireless dedication and exceptional legal ability had put her in a position of prominence, even though she was still an intern. Ethan trusted her more and more, assigning her to important cases and requesting her opinion in strategy meetings. On a Monday morning, Jessica arrived at the office to find an unusual commotion. Colleagues whispered in the hallways, casting curious glances in her direction. Intrigued, she went to her desk where she found an official envelope with the firm's logo. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and read its contents. It was a promotion, not just an ordinary promotion, but a direct leap from intern to junior associate attorney, skipping several steps in the traditional hierarchy of the firm. "Congratulations, Jessica," Ethan's voice surprised her. She turned to find him smiling, his blue eyes shining with what seemed like pride, and perhaps something more. "You deserve it. In fact, it's long overdue." I don't know what to say," stammered Jessica, still dazed by the news. "You don't need to say anything," Ethan replied, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. The touch, though brief, sent a shiver throughout Jessica's body. "Your work speaks for itself." As Ethan walked away, Jessica noticed the mixed looks from her colleagues. Some seemed genuinely happy for her, others clearly envious. And then her eyes met Richard Miller, who was watching her from across the office with an expression that mixed contempt and determination. In the days that followed, Jessica immersed herself in her new role with renewed enthusiasm. Now, with access to more complex cases and greater autonomy, she felt she could finally show her full potential. However, her meteoric rise did not go unnoticed. Richard Miller, in particular, seemed to have made it his personal mission to make Jessica's life as difficult as possible. One afternoon, while Jessica was working on an important case, Richard approached her desk. "Impressive how some people rise quickly in their careers, isn't it?" he commented, his seemingly casual tone masking latent hostility, "especially when they have special support from management." Jessica looked up from her documents, facing Richard's gaze without hesitation. "If you're insinuating something, Dr. Miller, I suggest you be direct." Richard smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just saying it's a shame when talent is overshadowed by other qualities. The only qualities that have brought me here were my competence and dedication," Jessica replied, keeping her voice firm. "Perhaps you should focus more on your own work and less on spreading unfounded insinuations." Richard's smile faded, replaced by an expression of barely contained anger. "Be careful, young lady. You may have impressed Ethan, but you still have a lot to learn about how things really work around here." Before Jessica could respond, Ethan's voice sounded behind them. "Any problem here?" Richard quickly composed himself. "No problem, Ethan. I was just giving some tips to our new associate." Ethan looked from Richard to Jessica, his expression serious. "Jessica, I need you in my office. We have a new case that requires your attention." As she followed Ethan, Jessica could feel Richard's furious gaze on her back. She knew she had just made a powerful enemy, but she was determined not to be intimidated. In the privacy of Ethan's office, Jessica finally relaxed a bit. "I'm sorry about that," she said. "I didn't mean to cause problems." Ethan observed her for a moment, an indecipherable expression on his face. "You didn't cause any problem, Jessica. Richard is the one who needs to learn to deal with changes." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "But I need you to understand something. Your promotion, your success here, all of this is based solely and exclusively on your merit. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Jessica nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude and something else she couldn't name. Ethan's gaze softened, and for a moment it seemed like he wanted to say something more. But the moment passed and they immersed themselves in work. The following weeks were a test of endurance for Jessica. While she continued to impress with her work, she faced growing hostility from Richard and his allies. Difficult cases mysteriously ended up on her desk. Deadlines were shortened without warning. Important information sometimes got lost before reaching her. But with each obstacle, Jessica responded with even more determination. She spent sleepless nights studying, built alliances with other lawyers who recognized her talent, and continued to deliver exceptional results. Ethan, in turn, observed all of this with a mixture of admiration and growing concern. He knew Jessica was being unfairly tested, but he also recognized that intervening too much could make things worse for her. Additionally, there were his own confused feelings to consider. With each passing day, it became more difficult for him to maintain the professional distance he knew was necessary. One night, working late on a particularly challenging case, Jessica and Ethan found themselves alone in the office. The tension between them, always present, seemed amplified by the silence of the empty environment. "You don't need to stay so late," said Ethan, his soft voice breaking the silence. Jessica looked up, meeting his intense gaze. "I want to stay. This case, it's important for me to prove I can handle it." Ethan approached, sitting on the edge of her desk. "Jessica, you have nothing to prove. Everyone here knows how capable you are." "Not everyone," she replied, thinking of Richard and his allies. "The people who matter know," said Ethan, his hand unconsciously moving to touch hers. The touch, though brief, sent an electric current between them. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Jessica felt her heart race, aware of every inch of the space between them. Ethan was the first to break the moment, suddenly pulling away. "I would say we should focus on the case," he said, his voice hoarse. Jessica nodded, trying to ignore the whirlwind of emotions in her chest. They returned to work, but something had changed. An invisible line had been crossed, and they both knew they couldn't pretend much longer that what they felt was just professional admiration. As the night progressed, Jessica wondered how she would balance her growing feelings for Ethan with her professional ambitions and the challenges she faced at the firm. What she didn't know was that her greatest challenges, both personal and professional, were yet to come. Fall arrived in New York, bringing with it not just a change in the weather, but also a turning point in Jessica's professional life. On a cold April morning, she arrived at the office to find a tense and agitated atmosphere. Employees whispered in groups, exchanging worried looks. Before she could investigate the reason for the commotion, Ethan called her to his office. His expression was serious, a furrow of concern marking his forehead. "Jessica, we have a delicate situation on our hands," he said, as soon as she closed the door behind her. "Horizon Construction, one of our biggest clients, is facing serious accusations of corruption and bid rigging." Jessica felt the weight of responsibility fall on her shoulders. Horizon Construction was one of the largest companies in the country, responsible for infrastructure projects throughout the United States. "I want you to lead the defense team," Ethan continued, surprising her. "Me?" Jessica couldn't hide her astonishment. "But there are much more experienced lawyers who could—" "None with your insight and ability to think outside the box," interrupted Ethan, his blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I need someone who can see angles that others don't, someone who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo." Jessica nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. "I won't disappoint you." "I know you won't," replied Ethan, a slight smile softening his worried features. In the weeks that followed, Jessica dove headfirst into the case. Days turned into nights at the office as she and her team sifted through mountains of documents, testimonies, and financial reports. As she delved deeper into the investigation, Jessica began to notice intriguing inconsistencies. There were patterns in the contracts and financial transactions that didn't fit the corruption narrative presented by the prosecution. One night, while working late, Jessica had an epiphany. Running to Ethan's office, she found him still working, his tie loosened and his shirt sleeves rolled up. "I think I discovered something," she said, spreading documents on his desk. For hours they worked side by side, connecting dots that no one else had noticed. Jessica explained her theory, gesturing animatedly, her eyes shining with the excitement of discovery. Ethan watched her, fascinated not just by her intelligence, but by the passion with which she approached the case. At one point, they both reached for the same document, their hands touching. The contact, though brief, sent a wave of electricity between them. Their eyes met, and for an instant, the world seemed to disappear around them. Jessica could feel Ethan's breath, noticing how his eyes briefly dropped to her lips before returning to meet her gaze. The moment was broken by the sound of Ethan's phone. Clearing his throat, he moved away to answer, leaving Jessica with a racing heart and slightly trembling hands. In the days that followed, Jessica struggled to maintain professional focus, but it was increasingly difficult to ignore the growing tension between her and Ethan. Each meeting, each conversation seemed charged with unspoken meaning. Meanwhile, her investigation continued to advance. Jessica discovered that, far from being guilty of corruption, Horizon Construction had been the victim of an elaborate setup orchestrated by a rival conglomerate. Presenting these discoveries, however, proved to be a greater challenge than she expected. In a crucial meeting with Horizon Construction's board of directors, Jessica faced skepticism and even hostility from some executives who doubted her experience. It was at this moment that Ethan intervened, his firm voice echoing through the conference room. "Gentlemen, I suggest you listen carefully. Ms. Mendez has not only saved your company from a legal disaster, but has also discovered who is really behind these accusations." Ethan's support gave Jessica the confidence she needed. With eloquence and precision, she presented her findings, dismantling point by point the accusations against the construction company. By the end of the presentation, Horizon Construction's CEO, a normally impassive man, was visibly moved. "Ms. Mendez, you've not only saved our company, but also the lives of thousands of employees who depend on us. We can't thank you enough." The victory was resounding. The charges against Horizon Construction were dropped, and an investigation was opened against the rival conglomerate. Anderson and Associates was flooded with new clients, attracted by the brilliant resolution of the case. For Jessica, however, professional success was accompanied by growing personal unrest. Her relationship with Ethan had become a complicated dance of mutual attraction and professional boundaries. One night, celebrating the victory in the case, the team gathered at an elegant bar in downtown New York. Amidst toasts and congratulations, Jessica found herself alone with Ethan in a more secluded corner. "You were amazing," he said, his voice low and intense, "not just in this case, but in everything you do." Jessica felt the blush rise up her neck. "Thank you for trusting me," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. For a moment they were silent, the air between them charged with unresolved tension. Ethan took a step toward her, his hand lightly brushing her arm. "Jessica, Before he could finish, they were interrupted by Richard Miller, who approached with a forced smile. "Congratulations, Jessica," he said, his tone bordering on sarcasm. "Who would have thought our young prodigy would save us all?" The moment between Jessica and Ethan dissipated, but the tension remained, now for different reasons. Jessica could feel the resentment emanating from Richard, and she knew that her victory in the Horizon construction case had only intensified the rivalry. As the night progressed, Jessica found herself divided between the euphoria of professional success and the confusion of her personal feelings. She knew she was entering dangerous territory with Ethan, but couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to, stop. What she didn't know was that this night would mark just the beginning of a series of events that would test not only her ability as a lawyer, but also her principles, her courage, and above all, her heart. The weeks following the victory in the Horizon construction case were a whirlwind for Jessica. Her name was in all the specialized magazines, and the firm's phone wouldn't stop ringing with new clients wanting her services. However, amid all this professional success, Jessica found herself increasingly entangled in a personal dilemma. The tension between her and Ethan had reached a critical point. Each meeting, each hallway conversation seemed loaded with unspoken meaning. The exchanges of glances lasted a second longer than appropriate. The smiles were warmer than strictly professional would allow. One afternoon, while working together on a new case, the inevitable happened. They were alone in Ethan's office, surrounded by piles of documents, when their hands touched as they reached for the same file. The contact, though brief, was like a spark that ignited all the air around them. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "Jessica, I can't ignore this anymore," he said, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. Jessica felt her heart race. "Ignore what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "This between us," Ethan replied, taking a step toward her. "This, connection. You feel it too, don't you?" Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, trying to organize her thoughts. When she opened them again, she found Ethan inches away, his intense blue eyes fixed on her. "Ethan, she began, but the words died in her throat when he raised his hand to gently touch her face. The kiss, when it finally happened, was like an explosion of long-repressed emotions. Jessica found herself wrapped in Ethan's strong arms, her whole body responding to a desire she had denied for so long. But reality hit them like a bucket of cold water when they heard voices approaching in the hallway. They separated abruptly, adjusting clothes and hair with trembling hands. This can't happen again," said Jessica, her voice betraying the internal battle she was waging. Ethan nodded, though his eyes said otherwise. "You're right. We're professionals. We have responsibilities." But they both knew it was easier said than done. In the days that followed, each encounter, each meeting, was a torture of repressed desire and guilt. To further complicate matters, Jessica noticed an increase in hostility from Richard Miller. She caught him several times observing her with Ethan, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. One morning, Richard cornered her in the file room. "I hope you know what you're doing, Jessica," he said, his tone threatening. "It would be a shame if your meteoric rise was interrupted by indiscretions." Jessica felt the blood freeze in her veins. "I don't know what you're talking about, Dr. Miller," she replied, keeping her voice firm. Richard smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course not. I'm just giving friendly advice. After all, not everyone here would be happy to see the firm involved in a scandal. Richard's words haunted her in the following days. Jessica found herself torn between her love for the profession, her ambition, and her increasingly deep feelings for Ethan. One night, working late, she was surprised by Ethan in her office. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, they remained silent, the air between them charged with unresolved tension. "This is killing me, Jessica," Ethan finally said, his voice almost a whisper. "Trying to pretend I don't feel anything for you. It's impossible." Jessica felt tears forming in her eyes. "Ethan, we can't. The firm, our reputation." "What if I didn't care about any of that?" he interrupted, taking a step toward her. "What if all I wanted was you?" Jessica's heart seemed to want to jump out of her chest. She knew she was on the edge of a precipice, that her next decision could change the course of her life forever. She began, but was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. "Ethan, are you in there?" Richard's voice sounded from the other side. The moment broke, and Jessica saw a mixture of frustration and resignation pass over Ethan's face. "We need to go," he said, his voice returning to a professional tone. "We have that meeting with the board in 5 minutes." As they headed to the meeting room, Jessica felt as if she was being pulled in opposite directions. On one side was everything she had achieved, her brilliant career, the respect of her peers. On the other, a love that threatened to consume everything in its path. What Jessica didn't know was that her choices in the coming days would not only define her personal and professional future, but would also place her at the center of a much larger and more dangerous plot than she could imagine. Richard's veiled threats were just the tip of the iceberg, and soon she would discover that in the world of corporate power, love can be both a weakness and a strength. As she entered the meeting room, Jessica took a deep breath, preparing for another act in this drama her life had become. But one thing she knew for certain: whatever path she chose, there would be no going back. The air in the meeting room was thick with tension. Jessica sat at the oval table, aware of Ethan's gaze from across and Richard Miller's intimidating presence to her right. The administrative board of Anderson and Associates was gathered to discuss a new high-profile case, but Jessica could hardly concentrate on the words being spoken. Her mind kept returning to the interrupted moment in the office, to the unspoken words between her and Ethan. She forced herself to focus, knowing that any slip now could be fatal for her career. "And that's why I proposed that Ms. Mendez lead this case." Ethan's voice brought her back to reality. Jessica blinked, surprised. The case in question involved a pharmaceutical giant accused of unethical testing on a new drug. It was exactly the kind of challenge she would love to tackle, but the timing couldn't be worse. "With all due respect, Ethan," Richard's voice cut through the air like a razor, "don't you think this case requires someone with more experience?" Ethan frowned. "Jessica has repeatedly proven her competence. Or do you disagree with the results she's been delivering, Richard?" The tension between the two men was palpable. Jessica felt the weight of the other board members' gazes upon her. "I appreciate the confidence, Dr. Anderson," she said, keeping her voice firm. "But perhaps Dr. Miller is right. This case is extremely delicate and—" "Nonsense," Ethan interrupted. "You're the right person for this, Jessica, unless you have some personal reason to decline." The look he gave her was loaded with meaning. Jessica swallowed hard, feeling cornered. No reason," she replied, forcing a smile. "I accept the case." The meeting continued, but Jessica barely registered the rest. Her mind was in turmoil, divided between professional excitement and fear of the personal complications this might bring. At the end of the meeting, as everyone dispersed, Richard approached her. "Congratulations on the new case, Jessica," he said, his tone falsely cordial. "I hope you're prepared to handle all its implications." Before she could respond, he walked away, leaving her with an uncomfortable feeling in the pit of her stomach. That night, immersed in the documents of the new case in her apartment, Jessica was surprised by a knock at the door. Her heart raced. when she saw Ethan standing in the hallway, looking as out of place as she felt. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low and intense. Jessica hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing him to enter. The small, cozy apartment suddenly seemed tiny with Ethan's imposing presence. "Jessica, he began, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I can't keep pretending nothing is happening between us." She felt her heart racing. "Ethan, we can't. It's unethical, it's real," he interrupted, taking a step toward her. "What I feel for you is more real than anything I've ever felt before." Jessica closed her eyes, feeling the heat of his body so close to hers. When she opened them again, she saw in Ethan's eyes a reflection of her own desire and conflict. "What if they find out?" she whispered. "My career, everything I've built." "Will, be discreet," he replied, his hand rising to caress her face. "No one needs to know." The kiss that followed was different from the first. It was slow, deep, loaded with promises and dangers. Jessica found herself surrendering, all her fears and doubts momentarily silenced by the intensity of her feelings. But even as she lost herself in Ethan's arms, a part of her knew they were entering dangerous territory. Richard's veiled threats, the ethical implications, the risk to their careers, all this hung over them like a dark cloud. The next morning, Jessica woke with a mixture of euphoria and apprehension. Ethan had already left, leaving only a note with the words, "We'll be careful, trust me." As she prepared to go to the office, Jessica couldn't help but think how her life had transformed into something out of a romance novel. The delivery girl, who became a successful lawyer, now involved in a complex case and a secret romance with the CEO. What she didn't know was that her challenges were just beginning. Upon arriving at the office, she was greeted by a Richard Miller with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jessica, good thing you arrived early," he said. "There's something we need to discuss about the pharmaceutical case, in private." As she followed him to an empty meeting room, Jessica felt a shiver run down her spine. Something told her she was about to discover that in the world of corporate law, secrets come at a high price, and the shadows of the past have a habit of catching up even to those who run the fastest. What did Richard know, and how far would he go to use that information? Jessica took a deep breath, preparing to face whatever came next, knowing that every step from there on would be a dangerous dance between love, ambition, and ethics. Jessica closed the door of the meeting room behind her, facing Richard Miller with a mixture of apprehension and determination. The smile on his face was like that of a cat who had just cornered a particularly juicy mouse. "Sit down, Jessica," he said, indicating a chair. "We have a lot to talk about." She sat down, maintaining an upright posture and a firm gaze. "What exactly do you want to talk about, Dr. Miller?" Richard slid a folder across the table toward her. "Open it," he ordered. With fingers she struggled to keep steady, Jessica opened the folder. Her heart almost stopped when she saw the contents, photos of her and Ethan, entering her apartment, kissing, leaving together early in the morning. "This is," she began, but Richard interrupted her. "Invasion of privacy? Blackmail? Maybe. But it's also the reality of the world you chose to enter, my dear." Jessica closed the folder, her face a mask of calm that didn't reflect the turmoil inside. "What do you want, Richard?" He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and malice. "I want you to decline the pharmaceutical case. Tell Ethan you feel overwhelmed, that you need more experience. Any excuse will do. And if I refuse?" Richard smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "Then these photos will find their way to the Bar Association's ethics board. I'm sure they'd be very interested to know how our young prodigy achieved her position so quickly." Jessica felt a wave of nausea, but forced herself to maintain composure. "Why is this so important to you? It's just another case." "Oh, Jessica." Richard laughed, a humorless sound. "You still have so much to learn. This isn't just another case, it's the case, and you're diving into much deeper and more dangerous waters than you imagine." He stood up, smoothing his impeccable suit. "You have until the end of the day to communicate your decision to Ethan. Choose wisely. With that, he left the room, leaving Jessica alone with her thoughts and the incriminating folder. For hours, Jessica struggled with herself. Her analytical lawyer's mind examined every angle, every possible way out. But her heart, for the first time in her professional life, screamed louder than her reason. At the end of the day, she found herself knocking on Ethan's office door. When she entered, she saw the immediate concern in his eyes. "Jessica, what happened? You look—" "Richard knows," she interrupted, her voice almost a whisper. "About us." Ethan visibly paled. "How?" Jessica quickly explained about the photos and Richard's blackmail. As she spoke, she saw Ethan's expression change from shock to anger and finally to cold determination. "He won't get away with this," said Ethan, his voice dangerously low. "Ethan, maybe I should just leave the case, or even the firm. I can't risk your reputation, everything you've built." "No," his response was immediate and firm. "We won't let Richard or anyone else intimidate us. There's something bigger happening. Here, Jessica, something related to this pharmaceutical case." He stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of New York. "I think it's time you knew the whole truth." Over the next 2 hours, Ethan revealed to Jessica a web of corruption and collusion that went far beyond the pharmaceutical case. It involved high-ranking politicians, powerful businessmen, and, to her horror, several members of Anderson and Associates itself. "That's why I insisted so much that you take this case," Ethan explained. "I need someone I can trust completely, someone with unwavering integrity." Jessica felt the weight of responsibility fall on her shoulders. "But why is Richard so determined to keep me away from the case?" "Because he's part of it all," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with disgust. "And he fears that you, with your insight, will discover the truth." The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with implications. Jessica knew she was at a crossroads that would define not only her career, but also who she was as a person. "What do we do now?" she finally asked. Ethan approached, taking her hands in his. "We fight, together, no matter the cost." At that moment, looking into the eyes of the man she loved, Jessica made her decision. They would face this storm together, no matter how strong it was. What they didn't know was that the real battle was just beginning. The shadows that stirred in the backstage of power in New York were about to engulf them, testing not only their love, but every fiber of their being. As they left the office together that night, under the dark sky of a city that never sleeps, Jessica and Ethan knew they had crossed a point of no return. The game was different now, and the stakes had never been higher. The days that followed were a whirlwind of frantic activities for Jessica and Ethan. Working in secret, often until late at night in discreet locations to avoid suspicion, they delved deep into the investigation of the pharmaceutical case and its ramifications. Jessica discovered that her legal intuition was even sharper when driven by the adrenaline of danger and the determination to uncover the truth. Each document she examined, each testimony she analyzed, revealed more layers of a conspiracy that seemed endless. One night, while working in Jessica's apartment, she made a shocking discovery. "Ethan, look at this," she called, pointing to her laptop. "These financial records. There's a series of suspicious transfers to offshore accounts, and look at the name that appears as the final beneficiary." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, his familiar cologne momentarily distracting Jessica from her discovery. His eyes widened as he read the name on the screen. "It can't be," he murmured. The name was Anthony Williams, one of the founding partners of Anderson and Associates and Ethan's mentor. "This explains why Richard is so determined to keep us away from the case," said Jessica, her mind working quickly. "He must be protecting Anthony." Ethan moved away, running his hands over his face in a gesture of frustration and disbelief. "Anthony was like a father to me. He brought me into the firm, taught me everything I know. How could he?" Jessica stood up, enveloping Ethan in a comforting embrace. "Sometimes the people we admire most disappoint us in the worst possible way," she said softly. They stayed like that for a moment, finding strength in each other. When they separated, there was a new determination in Ethan's eyes. "We need more evidence," he said. "Something concrete we can take to the authorities." In the days that followed, Jessica and Ethan intensified their investigations, always being careful not to raise suspicions at the firm. It was a dangerous game of cat and mouse, where every move needed to be carefully calculated. One afternoon, while Jessica was immersed in a pile of documents in her office, Richard entered without knocking. "So, Jessica," he said, his tone falsely casual, "how is the case going? Have you decided it's too much for you to handle?" Jessica looked up, maintaining a neutral expression. "Actually, Dr. Miller, I'm making significant progress. This case is fascinating in its complexity." She saw a flash of concern pass through Richard's eyes before he could mask it. "Well, don't forget our agreement," he said, lowering his voice. "It would be a shame if certain information came to light, wouldn't it?" "Don't worry, Dr. Miller," Jessica replied, allowing herself a small smile. "I have everything under control." As soon as Richard left, Jessica sent a coded message to Ethan. They had developed a secret communication system for situations like this. That night, they met at a discreet cafe in downtown. "Richard is getting nervous," said Jessica, after reporting the encounter. "He knows we're close to something big." Ethan nodded, his expression grave. "I discovered something today that might be the final piece of the puzzle, but it's risky, very risky." He explained that there was a safe in Anthony Williams' office that supposedly contained incriminating documents. Documents that could expose the entire corruption network. "How are we going to access that safe?" asked Jessica, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "There's a charity fundraiser for the firm this weekend," Ethan replied. "All the partners will be there. It will be our chance to enter Anthony's office without raising suspicions." Jessica felt a shiver run down her spine. What they were about to do was illegal, dangerous, and could ruin their careers if they were caught. But it was also the only way to expose the truth and bring justice. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. Ethan held her hand across the table, his eyes conveying a mixture of love, pride, and concern. "Jessica, if something goes wrong—" "It won't," she interrupted. "We're in this together, remember?" As they planned the details of their risky operation, Jessica couldn't help but think about how her life had changed, from food delivery girl to successful lawyer, and now about to become a kind of corporate spy. It was surreal, exciting, and terrifying at the same time. What she didn't know was that the revelations they were about to discover would shake not only Anderson and Associates, but the entire legal and business landscape of New York. And at the center of it all, her love for Ethan would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. As the day of the charity fundraiser approached, the tension grew. Jessica and Ethan knew they were about to cross a line from which there would be no return. But they also knew that together, they were capable of facing any challenge that fate had in store for them, the night of the charity. Fundraiser arrived, bringing with it a mixture of expectation and apprehension. The ballroom of the five-star hotel in the heart of New York shone with the luxury and opulence characteristic of Anderson and Associates events. Jessica arrived alone, wearing a long navy blue dress that accentuated her curves and beautifully contrasted with her tanned skin. Her hair was pinned in an elegant bun, and she carried a small evening bag that concealed much more than lipstick and compact powder. Ethan was already there, impeccable in his tuxedo, conversing with a group of senior lawyers. Their eyes briefly met across the ballroom, a silent communication passing between them. The plan was in motion. Jessica circulated around the event, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues and clients, always aware of the passing time. She noticed Richard Miller in a corner, his eyes following her with a mixture of suspicion and poorly disguised desire. After about an hour, Ethan made a discreet signal. It was time. Jessica excused herself from the group she was conversing with and casually headed for the exit of the ballroom. In the corridor, she found Ethan waiting near the elevators. "Ready?" he asked in a low voice. Jessica nodded, feeling the adrenaline rush through her veins. "Let's go." They took the elevator to the floor of the office using Ethan's access card. The office was dark and silent, a stark contrast to the lively party a few floors below. Moving quickly and silently, they headed to Anthony Williams' office. Ethan used a master key to open the door and they entered, closing it behind them. "The safe should be behind that painting," whispered Ethan, pointing to a large abstract painting on the wall. Jessica moved the painting, revealing the built-in safe. "And now, how are we going to open it?" Ethan took a small device from his pocket. "This should work. It's a state-of-the-art password decoder. It will take a few minutes." While Ethan worked on the safe, Jessica stood guard, her ears alert to any suspicious sound. The minutes seemed to drag on forever. Finally, a soft click was heard. "Got it," said Ethan, a tone of triumph in his voice. They opened the safe, finding a series of folders and documents. Quickly, they began photographing everything with their cell phones, knowing that every second counted. It was then that they heard voices approaching in the corridor. Jessica felt her heart freeze. "Quick, hide," whispered Ethan, pushing her behind a large bookshelf. The door opened, and Jessica recognized the voices of Richard Miller and Anthony Williams. "I'm sure they're plotting something, Anthony," Richard was saying. "That girl is too smart for her own good." "Calm down, Richard," Anthony replied. "Ethan is like a son to me. He would never—" His voice stopped abruptly. Jessica, peeking through a crack in the bookshelf, saw the exact moment when Anthony noticed the open safe. "What the hell?" he exclaimed, running to the safe. At that moment, Ethan came out of his hiding place. "Looking for this, Anthony?" he said, holding a flash drive. Anthony's face paled. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "Discovering the truth," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with disappointment and anger. "How could you, Anthony? All these years, all these lies," Richard advanced threateningly. "Hand it over now, Ethan, or what?" Jessica's voice cut through the air as she emerged from her hiding place. "Are you going to blackmail us again, Dr. Miller?" The situation seemed about to explode when, suddenly, the lights came on completely and several people entered the room. To everyone's shock, among them was Detective Olivia Turner, known for her fight against corruption. "Good evening, gentlemen," said the detective. "It seems we arrived just in time for the big reveal." Jessica and Ethan exchanged surprised looks. This was not part of the original plan. What's happening here?" Anthony stammered. Ethan stepped forward. "I alerted the authorities, Anthony. I couldn't let this continue." In the chaotic minutes that followed, Anthony and Richard were detained for questioning. Detective Turner explained that Ethan had contacted her weeks before, providing crucial information that allowed setting up a larger operation. As the police searched the office and collected evidence, Jessica pulled Ethan to a corner. "Why didn't you tell me about the police?" she asked, a mixture of relief and hurt in her voice. Ethan held her hands, his eyes conveying a silent plea for understanding. "I wanted to protect you, Jessica. If something went wrong, you could claim genuine ignorance." Jessica shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "We're in this together, remember? No secrets." Before Ethan could respond, they were interrupted by Detective Turner. "Dr. Anderson, Ms. Mendez, we need your complete statements," she said. "Tonight is just the beginning. We have a long battle ahead." As they followed the detective out of the room, Jessica and Ethan exchanged an emotion-filled look. They had crossed a point of no return. Anderson and Associates would never be the same, and their lives had changed forever. But amid the chaos and uncertainty, one thing remained constant: the love and trust they had built. Together they would face whatever the future held, knowing that their partnership, both professional and personal, was strong enough to overcome any challenge. As they left the office building, accompanied by the police and under the curious gaze of their colleagues who were still at the party, Jessica and Ethan knew this was just the first page of a new chapter in their lives. A chapter full of challenges, but also of hope and infinite possibilities. In the weeks following the night of the charity fundraiser, Jessica and Ethan's world turned upside down. Anderson and Associates became the epicenter of a scandal that shook the legal and business landscape of New York. Newspaper headlines screamed about corruption, bribery, and money laundering. The name of Anthony Williams, once synonymous with respect and integrity, was now associated with a web of crimes that extended across various companies and even sectors of the government. Jessica and Ethan found themselves at the center of a media hurricane. They were simultaneously heroes and pariahs depending on who was telling the story. To many, they were the courageous whistleblowers who hadn't feared facing the system. To others, they were traitors who had destroyed a respectable institution. The office was in chaos. With Anthony and Richard in preventive detention and several other partners under investigation, leadership fell on Ethan's shoulders. He spent days and nights trying to keep the ship afloat, dealing with nervous clients, frightened employees, and a flood of legal proceedings. Jessica, in turn, found herself in a delicate position. Many of her colleagues avoided her, fearing being associated with the scandal. Others treated her with a mixture of admiration and fear. She felt isolated, bearing the weight of her actions and decisions. One afternoon, while working in her office, Jessica received an unexpected visit. It was Marilyn, the junior lawyer who had previously treated her with hostility. "Jessica, I wanted to apologize," said Marilyn, seeming genuinely sorry. "I didn't know. None of us knew what was really happening." Jessica offered a tired smile. "It's okay, Marilyn. We were all deceived in one way or another." This conversation was the first of many moments of reconciliation and understanding that Jessica would experience in the following weeks. Slowly, the atmosphere in the office began to change. People began to unite, determined to rebuild the firm's reputation on more ethical foundations. Meanwhile, Jessica and Ethan's relationship faced its own challenges. The stress of the situation, combined with the constant pressure from the media and ongoing investigations, tested the limits of their connection. One night, after a particularly difficult day of police testimonies, they finally had a moment alone in Jessica's apartment. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing," Jessica admitted, her voice betraying the tiredness and doubt she felt. Ethan pulled her close, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "We did what was necessary, Jessica, what was right. No matter how difficult it is now, we can't regret having chosen the truth." She nodded against his chest, finding comfort in his solid presence. "And us? With all this happening, we've barely had time for us." Ethan pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made Jessica's heart race. "We are stronger than all this, Jessica. What we have is real, it's lasting. And when all this storm passes, we'll be together, stronger than ever." In that moment, sharing a tender and passionate kiss, Jessica felt a renewal of her strength and determination. They had faced the impossible together and survived. Whatever the future held, they would face it hand in hand. Weeks turned into months. The case against Anthony Williams and his accomplices slowly advanced through the judicial system. Jessica and Ethan were regularly called to testify, reliving the events that had changed their lives. The firm, under Ethan's leadership, began to reinvent itself. New ethical protocols were implemented, transparency became the watchword, and slowly client trust began to be regained. Jessica, recognized for her crucial role in exposing the corruption scheme, saw her career take off in unexpected ways. She became a sought-after speaker at conferences on business ethics and a valued consultant by companies seeking to implement more transparent practices. One afternoon, almost a year after the night that changed everything, Jessica was in her new office, now a spacious room with a view of Central Park, when Ethan entered, a mysterious smile on his face. "I have a surprise for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Jessica opened it, her eyes widening as she read the contents. It was an invitation to an international conference on business law and ethics in London. She had been invited as the keynote speaker. "Ethan, this is amazing," she exclaimed, barely able to contain her emotion. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You deserve it, Jessica. More than that, actually." He paused, his eyes shining with a mixture of nervousness and hope. "Actually, there's something else I want to ask you." Jessica's heart leaped when she saw Ethan take a small velvet box from his pocket. She knew what was coming, and yet, when he opened the box, revealing a beautiful engagement ring, she felt tears of happiness form in her eyes. "Jessica Mendez, would you do me the honor of marrying me?" asked Ethan, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Yes," she exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms. "1,000 times yes." As they kissed, celebrating this new chapter in their lives, Jessica reflected on the amazing journey that had brought them here. From an underestimated delivery girl to a respected lawyer, and now fiancé to the man she loved, she had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable and emerged stronger. The future still held many challenges. The judicial case continued, the reconstruction of the firm was a work in progress, and her new position as an influential voice in the legal world brought its own responsibilities. But with Ethan by her side and the strength they had found in each other, Jessica knew they were ready to face anything that fate had in store for them. As the sun set over New York, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jessica and Ethan remained embraced, looking out the window at the city that had been the stage for their love story and triumph. The future was bright, full of promises and possibilities, and they could hardly wait to explore it together. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Jessica's apartment, illuminating the soft contours of her face as she slept. Ethan, already awake, watched her with a mixture of love and admiration. 2 years had passed since the marriage proposal, and their lives had changed dramatically during that period. The alarm went off, rousing Jessica from her sleep. She opened, her eyes finding Ethan's affectionate gaze. "Good morning, Mrs. Mendez Anderson," he said, smiling. Jessica smiled back, still getting used to her new last name. They had married just 3 months ago, in an intimate ceremony on the beaches of the Hamptons. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," she replied, stretching for a quick kiss before getting up. "Ready for another day of changes?" Ethan nodded, his expression becoming more serious, always. The day ahead was significant. After months of planning and negotiations, they would finally officially announce the complete restructuring of Anderson and Associates. As they got ready, Jessica reflected on the events of the past 2 years. The trial of Anthony Williams and his accomplices had been long and exhausting, but had finally come to an end 6 months earlier. The sentences had been harsh, sending a clear message to the corporate world about the consequences of corruption. The firm, under Ethan's leadership, and with Jessica's tireless support, had undergone a complete transformation. New partners were brought in, rigorous ethical practices were implemented, and a culture of transparency and integrity was cultivated. Jessica, in turn, had become a prominent figure on the international legal scene. Her lectures on business, ethics, and corporate reform attracted crowds, and she had even published a book telling her journey and the lessons learned. Arriving at the office, they were greeted by an atmosphere of expectation. Employees, lawyers, and the press crowded the lobby, awaiting the big announcement. Ethan squeezed Jessica's hand, seeking strength in her presence. Together, they climbed to the improvised podium. "Good morning, everyone," Ethan began, his firm voice echoing through the lobby. "Today marks not just a new chapter for Anderson and Associates, but a new beginning." Jessica watched with pride as Ethan outlined the changes. The firm would be renamed to Anderson, Mendez and Associates, reflecting not only their professional and personal partnership, but also the firm's new direction. "Our mission," Ethan continued, "is not only to provide legal excellence, but to be a beacon of integrity in the corporate world. We want to lead by example, showing that it's possible to succeed without compromising our values." When it was Jessica's turn to speak, she felt the weight of her words. 3 years ago, I was a food delivery girl dreaming of returning to law school. Today, I stand before you not just as a lawyer and partner, but as someone who believes in the power of change and redemption. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Our story, mine and Ethan's, is proof that it's possible to overcome adversity, face corruption, and build something better. This new firm is more than a business. It's a commitment to justice, ethics, and social transformation." The announcement was received with enthusiastic applause. Journalists crowded around, eager for more details, while employees celebrated what they saw as a promising new beginning. Later that day, after hours of interviews and meetings, Jessica and Ethan finally had a moment alone in their new joint, Office, a spacious area with a view of the New York skyline. "We did it," said Jessica, dropping into an armchair, exhausted but happy. Ethan sat next to her, taking her hand. "Yes, we did. But this is just the beginning, isn't it?" Jessica nodded, a gleam of determination in her eyes. "We still have so much to do, so many lives to impact, so many changes to implement. And we'll do it together," Ethan completed, leaning in for a gentle kiss. At that moment, looking out the window at the city that had been the stage for her extraordinary journey, Jessica felt a wave of gratitude and hope. From an underestimated delivery girl to one of the most influential lawyers in the country, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. But more than the professional achievements, it was the love she had found, both for Ethan and for justice, that truly defined her journey. Together they had faced the impossible, challenged the system, and emerged stronger. The future that stretched before them was full of promises and challenges. There was still much work to be done, many battles to be fought in the corporate and judicial world, but with their unwavering partnership and their shared commitment to ethics and justice, Jessica and Ethan were ready to face any obstacle. As the sun set over New York, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jessica and Ethan remained, embraced, contemplating the horizon. It was the end of a chapter, but the beginning of something much greater, a story of love, triumph, and transformation that would continue to inspire and impact lives for many years to come. And so, Jessica's journey, from food delivery to the corridors of power, from anonymity to influence, from solitude to true love, reached not an end, but a new and exciting beginning. A beginning full of infinite possibilities and the certainty that together they could change the world, one case at a time. Chapter 13. Challenges and Opportunities. Time passed. Quickly after the launch of the new Anderson, Mendez and Associates, months turned into a year, and the firm flourished under Jessica and Ethan's joint leadership. Their reputation as defenders of ethics and transparency in the corporate world grew, attracting clients who sought not just legal representation, but also guidance for more responsible business practices. On a sunny spring morning, Jessica entered her office to find Ethan already there, an enigmatic smile on his face. "Good morning." "Love," she said, leaning in for a quick kiss. "What brings you here so early?" Ethan held up an envelope. "This arrived for you. I think you'll want to see it." Intrigued, Jessica opened the envelope. Her eyes widened as she read the contents. It was an official invitation to become a member of the New York State Bar Association's Ethics Council. "This is amazing," she exclaimed, barely able to contain her emotion. Ethan hugged her, sharing her joy. "You deserve it, Jessica. No one has worked harder or with more integrity than you." As they celebrated this new achievement, Ethan's phone rang. His expression changed as he answered the call, becoming serious and concerned. "What is it?" Jessica asked as soon as he hung up. Ethan sighed heavily. "Remember Tech Vision? The technology company that approached us last month with suspicions of industrial espionage?" Jessica nodded. Tech Vision was a promising startup in the field of artificial intelligence, and the accusations against it had caused waves in the technology market. "Well," Ethan continued, "it seems the situation is much worse than we imagined. It's not just industrial espionage. There are indications of large-scale misuse of personal data." Jessica felt a shiver run down her spine. Cases involving privacy violations were always complicated, but this one seemed especially delicate. "What's the plan?" she asked, already entering legal strategy mode. "We need to dive deep into this," Ethan replied. "If the accusations are true, we're talking about a scandal that could shake the entire technology sector in the United States." In the weeks that followed, Jessica and Ethan found themselves immersed in one of the most challenging cases of their careers. The investigation led them to a labyrinth of programming codes, obscure contracts, and an international network of data transfer. The Tech Vision case tested not only their legal skills but also their ethics. On several occasions they were approached by powerful figures who tried to bribe or threaten them to cover up the case. One night, working late at the office, Jessica received an anonymous call. "Ms. Mendez," said a distorted voice, "I suggest you reconsider your investigation. Some doors are better left closed." Jessica felt a chill, but her determination only strengthened. "Who is this?" she demanded. "Someone who can make your life very difficult if you continue down this path," the voice replied before hanging up. Immediately, Jessica shared the threat with Ethan. Together, they decided to double the security and proceed with the investigation with even more vigor. As they unearthed more evidence, the scope of the case expanded. It wasn't just Tech Vision involved, but a network of technology companies operating in an ethical gray zone, manipulating personal data for profit and power. The case attracted national and international media attention. Jessica and Ethan found themselves at the center of a media hurricane, defending not just their clients, but also the right to privacy of millions of Americans. Amid all the chaos of the case, Jessica still found time for her new responsibilities on the Bar Association's Ethics Council. Her work there became even more crucial in light of the Tech Vision case, as she was able to influence discussions about the need for stricter data protection laws in the United States. The pressure was immense, and there were moments when both Jessica and Ethan felt the weight of their responsibilities. But it was in these moments that their partnership, both professional and personal, shone most brightly. One night, after a particularly stressful day of testimonies and meetings, they were at home, exhausted but determined. "Sometimes, I wonder if we're doing the right thing," Jessica admitted, her voice betraying her tiredness. "What if we're getting into something too big for us?" Ethan pulled her close, his eyes conveying strength and confidence. "Jessica, remember when you were just a delivery girl dreaming of returning to law school? Look at you now. We're exactly where we need to be, doing exactly what we need to do." His words renewed Jessica's determination. She knew he was right. Each challenge they faced was an opportunity to make a difference, to fight for justice in an increasingly complex world. As the Tech Vision case approached its climax, Jessica and Ethan knew they were on the verge of something monumental. Their actions would not only determine the fate of a company, but potentially shape the future of digital privacy in the United States and beyond. And so, they prepared for the final battle, knowing that, regardless of the outcome, they were on the right side of history. Together, they were more than just lawyers. They were guardians of justice in a digital age, tireless defenders of individual rights in an increasingly interconnected world. The day of the final trial in the Tech Vision case dawned with an electric atmosphere in New York. The courthouse was surrounded by journalists, digital privacy activists, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the outcome of one of the most controversial cases of the decade. Jessica woke up early, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. As she prepared, she mentally reviewed her arguments, checking every detail of her strategy. Ethan, sensing her tension, approached and embraced her from behind. "We're ready for this," he said softly. "Together, we can do anything." Jessica nodded, finding strength in his presence. "We're going to change the world today," she replied, a determined smile on her lips. Arriving at the courthouse, they were greeted by an agitated crowd. Cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions as they made their way into the building. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with expectation. When the judge entered and the session was opened, Jessica stood up, feeling the gaze of hundreds of people upon her. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was firm when she began to speak. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "the case before us today is not just about one company. It's about the future of privacy in our digital society." In the hours that followed, Jessica presented a meticulously constructed case exposing Tech Vision's unethical practices and its network of associated companies. She detailed how personal data of millions of Americans had been collected, manipulated, and sold without consent. Ethan, working in perfect sync with her, presented complex technical evidence in a way the jury could understand. Together, they painted a frightening picture of a world where individual privacy was routinely violated in the name of corporate profit. Tech Vision's defense counterattacked forcefully, arguing that their practices were standard in the industry and that excessive regulations would stifle innovation. But Jessica and Ethan were prepared for every argument, countering with facts, statistics, and precedent cases. The highlight of the trial came when Jessica called her surprise witness, a former TechVision employee who had risked everything to expose the company's unethical practices. His emotional and detailed testimony about the company's internal operations left the room in shocked silence. When the time came for her closing arguments, Jessica stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. She looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly and then turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice charged with conviction, "today you have the opportunity to make history. We are not just judging a company, we are defining what kind of future we want for our children. A future where our privacy, our personal data, our very digital identities are respected and protected. Or a future where we are mere products, our privacy sacrificed on the altar of corporate profit." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. "The choice you make today will send a message not just to America, but to the world. It will say that we, as a society, value our individual rights above the interests of large corporations. That we believe in innovation, yes, but not at the cost of our humanity." Her final words echoed through the room. Make the right choice. Protect our privacy, protect our future. When Jessica sat down, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. The judge had to bang his gavel several times to restore order. The hours of jury deliberation seemed to stretch on forever. Jessica and Ethan waited anxiously, their hands intertwined, finding comfort in each other. Finally, the jury returned. When the verdict was read, guilty on all charges, the room erupted in celebration. Jessica and Ethan embraced, tears of relief and joy in their eyes. The judgment against TechVision was substantial. A record fine, mandatory restructuring of their data practices, and public disclosure of all data collection methods. The case set a precedent that would reshape digital privacy laws across the country. In the days that followed, Jessica and Ethan found themselves at the center of a media storm. They were hailed as heroes, champions of privacy in a digital age. Their firm received an influx of new clients, all eager to work with the power couple who had taken on big tech and won. But for Jessica, the greatest reward was not the publicity or the professional success. It was the knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had used her abilities to protect the rights of ordinary people against corporate giants. One evening, a week after the verdict, Jessica and Ethan were relaxing at home when she received a call from the New York State Bar Association. They wanted her to lead a special commission on digital ethics and privacy law. "They want me to help draft new legislation," Jessica told Ethan after hanging up, her voice tinged with awe. Ethan smiled, his eyes full of pride. "From delivery girl to lawmaker. Is there anything you can't do, Jessica Mendez Anderson?" Jessica laughed, snuggling closer to him on the couch. "With you by my side, nothing at all." As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Her chance meeting in an elevator had led to a partnership that had not only transformed their lives, but had begun to transform the world around them. They knew there would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face. The digital landscape was constantly evolving, and with it new threats to privacy and individual rights. But together they were a force to be reckoned with, a blend of passion and principle, love and law, heart and mind. Jessica thought back to that day years ago when she had stood up to Ethan in the elevator, quoting the Constitution to a man who clearly underestimated her. How far they had come since then, how much they had grown together and individually. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be more cases to fight, more wrongs to right, more lives to impact. But no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together, hand in hand, hearts aligned in their shared vision of justice. And so, the story of Jessica Mendez, the delivery girl who became one of New York's most influential lawyers, continued to unfold, a testament to the power of determination, integrity, and love. A reminder that sometimes The greatest journeys begin with the smallest steps, and the most unlikely encounters can lead to the most extraordinary destinations. As night fell over New York City, Jessica and Ethan looked out at the twinkling lights of the skyline, a world they were helping to shape one case at a time. Their story wasn't ending. In many ways, it was just beginning, and what a story it would be.